This is Legends of Runeterra, and I'm Mr. Ahmed, and today we're going to be having a discussion about the current state of the Slay archetype, which, includes Nasus and a secondary champion, which is either Kindred or Thresh, one of the two. I've mostly seen Thresh, which makes sense since I think Thresh is the best out of the two. But this is going to be more of a discussion focusing on not necessarily Nasus Thresh, but actually on Atrocity. The pretty much what has become now the ultimate win card with Nasus because of his level up. The fact that he has Spell Shield when he levels up, and the fact that you can get him up to a ridiculous amount of damage if you play him right. Now, I've seen a lot of people talk about possibly nerfing Atrocity to a slow speed or making it 8 mana instead of 6 or 7, which I think is probably the best. I don't think Atrocity should be slow speed. In fact, I don't think I've even ever heard of a spell in Legends of Runeterra so far being nerfed, down in speed. I don't think there might be something I'm forgetting about, but I don't think there's ever been a spell in Legends of Runeterra that has had its speed nerfed. Like obviously mana gets nerfed, damage gets nerfed, effectiveness gets nerfed, but I've never heard of a speed nerf, so that might be kind of breaking new ground if that happens, which I hope it doesn't, because if that happens, then I'm pretty sure Nasus and Thresh will pretty much be pretty much a joke deck. I don't think it'll be serious and it won't be a meta deck. Now, the reason why I say that is because there are, people are talking about this like it's the only, insta-win, effect in the game, which it isn't. There are several others which you cannot stop at a certain point, like Lissandra, right? Lissandra, when she levels up, once she gets that Watcher down, you have to either have a Vengeance, or you need to have Hush, or Equinox, or there's actually that one, Demacia, weaker Hush. There's a weaker version of Hush in Demacia, which I can't remember the name of. You basically need some way to stop that unit, right? Some way to stop them from attacking, because the moment the Watcher attacks, that's it, your deck is destroyed. Unless you have some means of creating cards in your deck, right? Unless you have one champion on the board and a cheap champion spell in hand, you're pretty much lost, right? So, but it's the same thing with Atrocity, right? With Atrocity, you just need the right card in order to counter it. Now, one thing that is fair, however, is that, you could say, you can use Deny, but then there's Right of Negation, right, which is pretty much, I wouldn't say a better Deny, it's more like a side grade. It counters all spells, but you need to either burn a mana gem, or you need to kill one of your units, and killing one of your units isn't really reliable, because the enemy might kill that unit first. Well, the guaranteed way to get it off is, of course, by destroying one of your mana gems. So, Right Negation is pretty much a deny, right? Whether it's better or worse, it is a deny spell. So if you use Atrocity, then if you're going against an Iona deck, or if you're going up against a Shadow Eyes deck that has both Vengeance and Final Feast in hand, or maybe you use Atrocity before leveling up Nasus, which is a bad idea. Don't do that. If you use Atrocity before leveling up Nasus, all they need is a Vengeance, or even something lesser than that to stop him, right? So, right, you have that spell, you will have that counter, but then there's Right Negation, right? And so, if you're Ionia, you need 2 denies. You need Deny for the Atrocity, then you need Deny for the Right Negation. So, yeah. And here's another thing that I've kind of thought about the reason why the real reason I think that people are kind of complaining about atrocity decks right now, and the way they think they're overpowered, is that the thing with Nasus and Thresh is that you're not just working, like, it's not just you're statically, you're in a linear line working towards that, that end game, that finale, right? There's also the fact that depending on how you've constructed the deck, you're kind of half an aggro deck, right? You have a lot of units, right? If you're playing really well, you have a lot of units on the board. So it's not just that you're working towards this level up, it's that you also have a crap ton of units on the board, so you kind of become partially an aggro deck. I think that's actually the real reason why people complain about atrocity decks, is because, if it was just the atrocity, if it was just that finale with Nasus and Thresh, or Nasus and Kindred, which again I think Nasus Thresh is the superior option to Kindred. But if it was just them, I don't think people will be complaining as much. But I think it's because the deck archetype is a lot of the time half an aggro deck. There's Ravenous Butchers, there's Bekai Reapers, which Bekai Reaper, if your board state is really good, and if you attack in a certain way, that Bekai Reaper can deal a number on the enemy nexus, right? I've had it done to me, I've done it to my opponents. Bekai Reaper can absolutely be a devastating one-cost card. A one-cost card can cause a serious amount of damage to the enemy, right? And then you have Dunekeeper, which, in my opinion, is currently the most powerful, like, aside from Bekai Reaper, is the most powerful one-drop in the game, right? In my opinion. Maybe Legion Rearguard after its buff, kind of in a close second, but Dunekeeper, in my opinion, is currently the number one best one-drop unit in the game. And depending on how you run the deck, you might have a Cursed Keeper, you might have a Fading Icon, or maybe you use, instead of those, you use Blighted Caretaker. Personally, I don't run them, but I've seen people run them to certain successes, so definitely a viable option. Whatever. Obviously, you run Glimpse Beyond. You might also run a Spirit Leech alongside Glimpse Beyond for just more draw, more card draw. And then Black Spear. And then, depending on how you want to flavor it, you either run Rampage Kai or you run some different cards. But that's a general, how most people run the deck. They have a lot of these weaker kind of 1 to 2 drop units, and that's, I think, the main reason why people complain about this deck archetype so much, is because, if it was just the atrocity, I don't think people would be complaining so much, but because it's also have an aggro deck, I played this deck several times, and hopefully, depending on how I made this video, I also have gameplay on the screen right now, which I recorded earlier, but depending on what gameplay you're seeing now, you might have noticed just how much this surprising amount of board presence you have, and the fact that sometimes you don't even need Nasus or Thresh to actually win the game. Sometimes you just win through overwhelming force because of these units, which is surprising, but it's possible. So I think that's part of the reason why, and I guess it's because Nasus, when he levels up, he has Spell Shield, which is definitely one of the more frustrating keywords in the game. Because Spell Shield requires 2 spells, pretty much requires you to waste 2 spells instead of just the one to get rid of Nasus. And the fact that it's not possible to cast, Vengeance twice, and you need something like Vile Feast, you need some other spell alongside Vengeance in order to kill him, or if you're a Targon deck, you need some other targeting spell on Nasus, which from what I remember, Targon doesn't have many other quick, burst or fast speed spells that targets units aside from Hush. So a lot of people have suggested made the suggestion to nerf Atrocity. Now, what do I think of this? Well, again, this is kind of just my opinion on things. A deck shouldn't be nerfed so much that it's useless, right? My opinion, every deck should, well, it's impossible to make every deck equal, right? You can't make every deck archetype equal, right? There's going to be highs and lows. There's going to be decks which are just pretty much jokes. You know, they're joke decks, they're meme decks. People play them for fun, not to actually win. But the main thing is that I don't think you should nerf a deck archetype so much. You shouldn't run it so much to the ground that it becomes completely useless. Like, it's okay to nerf it to make it not meta anymore. Like, not meta anymore in the sense that it's not something that you can easily win with in ranked games, which I don't play in ranked games, but and there should be this kind of balance of, obviously there's going to be highs and lows, right? And this is something about not just card games, but pretty much any online game. There's going to be highs and lows. There's going to be points when a weapon, a spell, a whatever, a character is powerful, but when it isn't powerful anymore, gets nerfed to the ground where it is useless, and then it rises back up and is powerful again. That's something that's very common, but the best game design, in my opinion, is where something is nerfed enough that it's, you don't see it as often, but you still do see it. The people who spent all this time mastering that one character, that one spell, that one whatever, don't feel like their time was wasted. They don't feel like all the resources to make that deck, that spell, that character, whatever, all that experience isn't wasted. They can still play as them, they can still succeed with them, maybe not as much as before, but it's still possible, and it doesn't feel like they were pretty much butchered, right? So here's what I think should be done. I've seen people suggest making Atrocious slow speed. In my opinion, this would pretty much break the spell and make it completely useless. So, and I even heard some people going overkill and saying that it should be 8 cost and slow speed, which is ridiculous. But I think the best that I've heard so far is making it just 8 cost. I think that's the most fair suggestion I've heard. Or aside from that, maybe this is my suggestion. Maybe nerfing some of the. I don't think it's a good idea, actually. I was about to suggest nerfing some of the tournament cards, but that's actually a terrible idea. Yeah, that was my opinion on this whole issue. So, yeah, bye-bye.